everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Surviving Domestic Violence. I was about to say the radio show name. We don't want to do that. So forgive me for that. But welcome to Surviving Domestic Violence. It's your girl, Nakia P. Evans. Listen, I'm excited that you're here. Please make sure that you share this video. Share, share, share. Now, listen, I'm going to give you a trigger warning before we start, okay? Trigger warning, okay? We're going to talk about some raw and real things here, okay? There may be some language that you may not agree to. If that's the case, go ahead and, just go ahead and leave it if it doesn't work for you, okay? But we're going to be talking about some raw and real things when it comes to domestic violence, okay? Domestic violence, guys, is something that is completely real rampant these days, okay? It is something that has always been rampant, but the thing about it is a lot of times we don't really talk about it. We really don't battle these conversations, okay? And then when it comes to knowing certain people in domestic violence situations, sometimes we don't know how to help them, okay? So if you know me, if you followed me for, the last few years, you know that I was in a domestic violence situation myself, okay? Back in March of 2020, 2 days after my birthday, I was beaten and stabbed twice by my boyfriend at the time. That is a situation that took my life on a whole downward spiral, okay? And we'll talk about more about that later. But when it comes to domestic violence, guys, this is what I wanted to share because we need to know this information, okay? It is estimated that 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 9 men are victims of domestic violence. Sometimes these things are not talked about, these things are not reported, these things are not heard. And for someone who is in a situation with the justice system, it's just not it's not an easy thing, okay? It is definitely not an easy process. But for tonight, guys, we want to share our stories. We want to talk about domestic violence, how we survived domestic violence, what that looked like for us, and how we were able to overcome that, okay? How that affected our lives and how we were able to walk away from that, heal from that, and continue to advocate for it, okay? So tonight, guys, I do have a special guest with me tonight. I have Layla Green with me, and she's going to come up and I'm going to give her the floor to share her story of domestic violence. And once she finishes sharing her story, I'll jump back on and we'll continue to chat about it, okay? So let me go ahead and bring Layla on. Hi, love. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you doing?
Doing great, doing great, doing great. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for, sharing your story, coming and, being willing to share your story with us. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So what I'm going to do, love, is I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor for you to speak to our audience and share your story, and I'll be back. All right.
All right. Well, peace, everyone. I hope that you all are doing well, that you're happy, that you're at peace, and that you come tonight and that you're able to find healing, to find help, and to find community. I believe that when we share our stories, we embolden other people to share theirs. And the beauty of shared stories is that we realize we're not alone in the world. We realize that we're more alike than we are different. And the shared themes in our stories allow us to take action. So, yesterday I posted on my social media that sharing my story is the biggest fuck you to everyone who tried to silence me, to everyone who insists on silencing the stories of others. And it's the biggest fuck you to any residue of unworthiness, any residue of fear, any residue of rationalizing that tries to seep into my bones from time to time. So thank you once again, Nakia, for creating this space. And thank you for inviting me to share. The other day, I read this novel actually, and it says, "You're only human." There's a quote. It says, "You're only human. And as humans, we can't expect to shoulder all our pain. Sometimes we have to share it with the people who love us so we don't come crashing down from the weight of it all." So tonight, I just want to say that I am your sister. I love you. I'm your sister, Sawubona. Sawubona is a Zulu greeting that means I see you. I see all of you, your experience, your passions, your pain, your strengths, your weaknesses, your future. You're valuable to me. I see you. Sawubona. So, right before I walked down the aisle to marry my high school crush at 21 and at 6 months pregnant, I felt hesitant. And I felt just this small wave of anxiety. I felt what we as women have as our superpower, but oftentimes ignore and don't lean into, that little flutter in our gut that we call our intuition. And the thing about intuition is that it requires our faith. It requires faith because oftentimes there is little to nothing on which that flutter in the gut is based. Sometimes we don't have the full story. Sometimes we don't have all the facts. We don't have all the evidence. And so that pause, that hesitancy, that flutter in the gut requires faith. And it requires faith not in others, not in statistics, not in media, not in our well-meaning friends and family, but faith in ourselves, faith in our feelings, faith in the answers that we find in stillness, faith that something bigger than us cares too deeply for us to just go out and fuck up our lives. But I was not taught to honor that pause. I grew up in a really conservative Christian home, and I was not taught to honor my gut. I wasn't taught to honor that hesitancy. I was not taught to lean into it. I wasn't taught to be courageous enough to trust it in the face of all else. And so when I pulled up to the church that morning, ready to walk down the aisle, I ignored that pause. I ignored that whisper that said, run. And I don't even know where that came from because I hadn't seen any signs of aggression, any signs of anger, nothing like that. I just heard run. But I ignored it. Just like I ignored the whisper that came 2 months previous when he told me, if you don't give me a good enough reason to end this close friendship that I have with my ex-girlfriend, I'm calling off the wedding. I didn't pause to listen when a few months before that, he was being overly concerned with the friendship I had with a family that was close to me. I didn't listen to that pause and lean into that feeling of confusion when he would call me too sensitive. And even though some of these incidents only happened once or twice, I didn't honor the pauses. I didn't honor the questions. I didn't honor my feelings. I didn't lean into any of them. I just listened to the peer pressure of our religious group of friends who encouraged us to get married sooner rather than later because I was pregnant out of wedlock and we had a baby on the way. Also, many of our Christian friends treated us as though we had communicable diseases and they tried to keep their distance. We almost got disfellowshipped from our church. So it seemed that we only had each other and this ever increasingly small support system. But still, I didn't honor the pauses or anything like that. And sometimes that's all we have. We just have that little, or I don't like this feeling. But even if those things are whispers, I want to encourage you all to always honor the whispers in your soul. So I met my ex when we were teenagers. I was 17, he was 19. And before meeting, there were so many times that we shared the same space, we breathed the same air. There were a lot of people on my end who had recommended that I meet him. And so once we finally met, I thought, oh, wow, this is of God, this is something otherworldly. And we quickly became attached. We met at his missionary school and we spearheaded a bunch of different programs. We worked closely together on some programs. He got along well with my grandmother. And so I was just in this giddy phase as a 17-year-old of enjoying this crush with this 19-year-old boy who most of the girls were after. And I do remember at one point feeling as though he was toying with my emotions. I remember I wrote out this letter and I told him, look, I'm not like all these other little girls who are begging for your attention. My world does not revolve around you. You know, if you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. But don't play with my emotions. You're not going to be in and out. I was 17 and I told him that. And so it wasn't too long after that I remember my grandmother came to me and she said, I don't want you to have anything to do with this guy. It's a fatal attraction. He would not make a good husband and he would not make a good father. And I remember just wondering why and looking for more because, my grandparents raised me and my grandma had this history of being brutally honest with me from the time that I was a kid, maybe sometimes a little too honest. But she never said anything more than, this is a fatal attraction. He would not make a good husband and he would not make a good father. Well, 4 years later, after that, I had just suffered the loss of one of my best friends in the entire world. I'd suffered the loss of my grandmother. I was at this mission school. I felt all alone. And so I turned to that which was familiar, which was this guy. And he came back in my life and we were friends. And then he kind of exited my life. And then he heard, oh, there's another guy at her school who likes her. Let me swoop in and let me declare my feelings and my emotions. And so I remember listening to him on the other end of the phone, telling me that he wanted to be with me. He liked me. He always liked me. And in that moment, I told him, you know what? You don't get the opportunity to put me on this shelf until you're ready for me. I don't want to be with you. You've not had any interest or you've not declared any interest in me before finding about this other guy. So no, I don't want to be in a relationship with you. And so we cut things off. And then a year later, I went through another crisis. And once again, I turned to that which was familiar. And he was there for me. He supported me. He believed me. And even though he told me I had hurt him and telling him, no, I didn't want to be in a relationship the previous year, he chose me. And for someone like me who had grown up just faced with abandonment from so many people, my mother, my father, people who were emotionally unavailable to me, it felt so golden and so nice to be chosen by this guy, even after I had hurt him. And he was this guy that so many other people wanted to be with, but he had chosen me. And so when he asked me to be in a relationship with him, I told him absolutely. Well, a few months into our relationship, he kissed me. And I was really extremely religious as a teenager. I was extremely serious as a teenager. And I remember we had already had the conversation where I told him, listen, I'm saving myself for marriage. That includes kissing. I don't want to kiss before I'm married. And he told me, that's fine with me. That's good. Okay, cool. And so this night when he kissed me, I was very much conflicted because it felt nice. It was coming from this guy that I liked, but I didn't understand why he had violated my wishes. A couple of weeks later, we ended up having sex. That was against my wishes as well. And I remember just clinging to the door frame, not wanting to enter into his room. And he pulled me into the room and I felt like I had no other choice. I thought, this is my fault. I shouldn't have been in his house by myself. I shouldn't have been dancing with him. Like all of these things that I should not have been doing that I was taught were wrong. And so I assumed the blame and I guiltily had sex with him against my wishes. Once again, I was conflicted and I thought, well, first of all, I didn't even really feel that nice, but this is a guy that I like and I've had a crush on him for so long, but at the same time, he violated the wishes that I conveyed to him. And so I decided, well, I just need to put space between us. And so a couple of weeks later, I moved to a different state, but I didn't know it at the time. I was already pregnant. And so for the next few months, we kind of had this really strained relationship where a lot of people were coming to me saying, are you sure you want to be with him? Are you sure you want to be with him? It's long distance. You're young. There's so many other people that you can get to know. But I felt, no, I've had a crush on him. Maybe we're supposed to be together. And now we've had sex. So I'm supposed to be with him. There are a lot of things that we have in common. We want to serve God together. And so I remember I was just beginning to have the thoughts of breaking up with him simply because I started to notice little things like he created this schedule and we were supposed to stick to this schedule of when we could talk on the phone because we were long distance. And I remember thinking, well, that's weird, but then admiring it, saying, well, you know what? He's really solid. He's sticking to his schedule. He's not allowing all these other things to come in and distract him from his goals. That's a good thing. That shows discipline. Okay. So I just tried to rationalize all these little things, all of these little whispers in my soul. I just kind of rationalized them away. But eventually I got to the point where I thought, you know what? I don't know if I can do this. And the weekend that I thought, I don't know if I can do this, he came to visit me and he noticed that my belly was big. We took a pregnancy test and I was pregnant. And I remember we just cried and I cried and I thought, well, girl, that's what you get. You know, you're not supposed to open your legs before you get married. Like, what more could you expect? And I felt so bad, so depressed. But even in that state, there was pity for him. And I told him, you know what? Your life is just taking off. You can go ahead. Don't worry about us. I'll be fine. I'll take care of the baby. You have all this potential. Just go live your life. And he told me, no, you know, my dad wasn't really in my life and I don't want the same thing to happen. I want to be there for my child. We're going to be together. And I told him, okay. So maybe about a month later, we were at a friend's house and I was depressed about the pregnancy. And he's like, let's list all the positive things about this pregnancy. I couldn't think of one. And so he made this list. And at the end of the list, he said, and we're going to be married. And I remember just feeling like I was being dragged along this trajectory. And I felt like I had no control. And I don't know why I felt like I had zero control in the situation. I can only attribute it to a lot of the subconscious beliefs that I accepted because of my upbringing and the misogyny that existed in a lot of circles in which I was part. But I just felt like I wasn't in control and I was just kind of allowing things to happen. And so that was his proposal to me. We're going to be married. And I remember some of our friends who stood by our sides, they said, you guys, you know, you're in ministry, you're in the church, you want to work for God, you need to get married now because it's going to look really bad if you go out there trying to work for God, but you're pregnant, which means you had sex before you got married. And so once again, I thought, okay, you know, that makes sense. Let's get married and bring this child into covenant. And so we pushed our wedding date. We bumped it up and we got married within, I think, 3 months of being engaged. And that was within about 4 months of finding out that I was pregnant. And so we got married. And the very next day, my heart sank because I knew I had made the biggest mistake of my life. You know, there are a lot of people when I share parts of my story, they say, well, did you have any signs? What were the signs? And I tell them, no, I didn't have any signs of aggression, of abuse. But listen, even if you have signs, that is no excuse for anyone to abuse you, to mistreat you, or to put your life in harm's way. It is not your fault that someone chose to abuse you. It's not your fault at all. It's not your responsibility. Their actions are not your responsibility. But the day after we got married, I opted out of a honeymoon. A friend of ours came over to visit, and he and my ex got into this really heated argument. And my ex got up, he shouted at him, he stamped his foot across the floor, he called him some names, and he just went off on him. And I thought, oh my goodness, who did I marry? I just made the biggest mistake of my life. But still in that moment, I thought, well, this is just my cross that I'm going to have to bear because I married this man. Years ago, my grandma told me to stay far away from him. So this is just my fault. This is my cross. This is my burden. You know, God, can you just bless this mess? A few months later, our daughter was born. And by then already things were terrible. We were sleeping in separate rooms. Everything was an argument. He didn't believe me. If I had an issue with something, he would tell me, oh, you're just insecure. You're just too sensitive. You need to lighten up. You need to, all of these things that I needed to do there was no partnership. There was no marriage. There was no friendship within that marriage. Everything was simply things that I needed to adjust. At the time, I was extremely religious. I loved waking up in the morning and spending time in the Bible. And I thought, oh, now I got a husband. I can spend time in the Bible with my husband and we can just, bless the atmosphere in our home. He was wholly disinterested. And I didn't understand it because even though we had gone against the teachings of our church and had sex before we were married, he was one that would always encourage me, you need to get in your Bible, you need to get in your word, you need to spend time praying. But just overnight, there was zero interest, and I felt like I married a stranger. He would be gone for days. I didn't know where he was. And I remember just feeling like, okay, girl, you can't cry. You can't get down in the middle of the road and cry about it. Just keep it pushing, keep it pushing, keep it pushing. So about 6 months into our marriage, things were really bad in our marriage, and not just in our marriage, but also financially. And I don't know how in the world we survived. There were plenty of days that we were eating rice and peas every single day. And my ex is not American. He's from another country. And so I remember he reached out to his sponsor and he told him, listen, I have this young family. I'm not making money. I'm a fast learner. Can you please hire me to work at your company? And so his sponsor said, you know what? I'll pay for you and your family to come down one weekend. Let's talk about it and see what I can do for you. So we ended up moving to a different area. My ex got that job. And now on top of everything we were going through, now we were isolated. We didn't have any family close to us. We didn't have any friends close to us. It was just our daughter and the two of us. And I was in this apartment with a stranger. I had no idea who this man was. And things went from just arguing all the time about the most insignificant things to now he was becoming more aggressive. And I remember the very first time he put his hands on me, it was on a Saturday. And we were getting ready to go to church. And for some reason, something upset him. And he just went from 0 to 100. And I remember I got really scared and I ran into our daughter's room. I locked the door. I went into her closet. I grabbed her and we were hiding in the closet. And about 10 minutes later, the door swings open. The next door swings open. And I had pulled furniture up behind the doors. The doors swing open. I'm huddled in the closet with our daughter. And he's like, give me our daughter. I'm going to church. I'm taking her to church. I don't care what you do. And he was so upset. And I was so afraid that he would do something reckless while driving and harm our daughter. And so I told him, no, please let our daughter stay with us. It's okay. I got her. You go to church. We'll be here when you get back. It's okay. And he grabbed our daughter by the arms and he said, no, I'm taking her to church with me. Let her go. He pushed me across the room. And I remember just falling into the furniture of the bed. I scraped my leg on the bed. And I was just in shock. I sat on the floor, and nothing prepares you for that feeling of someone who has stood up before your friends and your family, vowing before God to protect you, harming you. And I didn't know what to think. I was in so much shock. And I just sat there on the floor thinking, okay, he didn't just push me, did he? And then he looked at me, he said, you see, you got hurt and it's your fault. You should have let her go. You shouldn't have gotten in the way. It's your fault. That argument just got worse and worse. He ended up leaving our daughter. He left for the day. He came back, he apologized, and thus began about almost 2 years of that cycle of abuse, of just apologizing, abusing, apologizing, abusing. And things just got worse. There was emotional abuse, there was physical abuse, there was spiritual abuse. I remember he used to tell me, we wouldn't have these problems if you were a more spiritual wife. And I believed him. And I remember there would be days and weeks where I'd have my Bible open and I'm praying over my Bible. I'm just like, Lord, help me be more spiritual. Help me be more converted. Like, what do I need to do to get this man to love me, to care for me? What he's doing is not right. Now, it never crossed my mind to have him arrested. It never ever crossed my mind. I had never heard of situations like these growing up. People in church are very hush hush about the realities of life and about the realities of many marriages in the church. Since I grew up in the church, I had no clue. And I also thought, well, because I was a stay at home mom, I thought, well, if I call the police, then he's going to lose his job. If he loses his job, he's going to be really angry with me. And then what are we going to do for finances, for income? What are we going to do? And so when the temptation would come, the temptation to call the police, I would rationalize away why I couldn't call them. And so I remember two more incidents took place. And finally, I called the police. And I remember I told them, please don't arrest him. Just talk to him. Let him know that what he's doing is wrong. It's not right. But don't arrest him. Don't take him to jail. And I remember the officer looked at me and he's like, okay, man, if that's what you want. But I want to let you know that this is abuse and you don't deserve this. You can have him arrested. We can get some help for you and your daughter. But this is wrong. It is never okay for a man to put his hands on you or for a woman to put her hands on a man. And I said, no, just don't arrest him. Just talk to him. And so the officer talked to him. And I remember several other things would take place. It was like every single weekend, something was happening. And I would always hide in the closet to try to get away from him. And he would always find me. One time he put a hole in the door. He cracked the door frame, just trying to find me, to get to me, to shake me up and scream and yell at me, curse at me, all over the simplest of things, tiny, tiny things. And so I remember just the other day, I was telling a friend, when I think back on those days, I just remember myself being so lifeless, so devoid of energy, and sadly thinking that I deserved it. I believed the lies that he told me that I deserved it. So finally, he actually agreed to get counseling from our pastor. And I didn't want to tell the pastor right off that there were physical things that were going on. But I thought, you know what? This is a new leaf. With him agreeing to this, maybe we can get some help. And so the pastor would come and things would be okay for a few days. And then the tiniest of things would set him off. And he would just go from 0 to 100 in a split second. And he'd always tell me, it's your fault. I'm this way because of you. You caused me to be this way. I remember one time I asked him, I said, hey, when we have dinner together as a family, can we try something new and like put our phones away for dinner and just spend family time? He got so upset. He threw dishes all over the place, yelled at me, cursed me out, called me all kind of names. And I just sat there and I just took it because I thought, like, what else am I supposed to do? I'm his wife and he's telling me this is my fault. So maybe I shouldn't have told him that. And with each occurrence, each incident that took place, I lost the little bit of voice that I did have. And I believed all of his lies and everything that he told me. I remember he would come home on the weekends from work and he would literally sit in a chair or lay in our bed and from Friday till Monday morning watch movies, movie after movie after movie. And I remember one Saturday I walked in and I said, hey, when you finish this movie, can we go out and spend some family time? Like, even if it's just take a walk, as a family. And he told me, get out of here. I don't want to hear you. And so I left the room. A few minutes later, I went back in. I said, hey, can we please spend some family time? Like, we have this 6-month-old daughter. She hasn't seen you all week. You're working. Can we spend time together? And once again, he told me, get out of here. I don't want to hear you. Like, don't bother me again. And I was upset. And I kind of applied a little pressure behind closing our door to the bedroom. And I went back into the living room. And I remember before I even had a chance to sit down, he ran out. He grabbed me by the neck. He threw me against the back of the sofa. He put his finger in my face. He said, don't you ever slam a door like that again. And he walked out and slammed the door behind him. And I remember once again, just sitting there shaking, thinking, okay, you're okay. Did that really happen? He had gaslit me so well. And I was just like, okay, well, that's right. I should have had a good attitude. I shouldn't have slammed the door. He's right. And, I just made him upset. I made him angry. And a few seconds later, he was back again. Oh, I'm so sorry. I love you so much. I'm so sorry. And he took me out on a nice date. And this would just happen over and over again. There would be so many times he would just throw things throughout the house, trying to hit me, just yelling and screaming. And there was one day that I tried to get away. And I remember I took our daughter, I ran to the car. I looked up into the rearview mirror and he was standing behind the car and he wouldn't move. And I was like, please move. I was crying. I was like, please move out of the way. Just let me go. Let me go. Like, you don't like me. You don't love me. Just let me go. And he stood there. He wouldn't move. And when I got out of the car, he held out his hand for me to give him the keys. He's like, that's what I thought. There were other times when he would tell me, leave. He's like, I don't care if you and our daughter have to walk the streets at night. Leave, get out of here. And there was one time I did leave. I had to ask a stranger, a neighbor, if I could use their phone to try to contact someone. The only people I had to contact were his family because they were the closest to us. And a little bit later, I saw him driving around in circles, and I was hiding behind a car with our daughter in the cold at night. And I remember his aunt called the number, that's which I'd used to call her, and she was like, "Oh, just go back. He's so sorry. He loves you. Just go back." We women sometimes have to go through these things, but if you show the love of Jesus, and if you show him that you're a Christian and you pray for him, things would change. I remember crying on the phone telling her, but it's not right. He puts his hands on me. It's not okay. It's not right. Why can't someone tell him that? And she's like, oh, just go back home. Go back home. So our lease was almost up. We decided to move. We were looking at houses. And I remember telling him, I don't want to take all of this stuff into our new house. And he sat beside me crying, hugging me, telling me, this is our chance to start over again. It's going to be a new life. We're going to turn a new leaf. I love you so much. Like, I promise things are going to get better. So we moved and things did not get better. On top of that, the few people that I had told, except one friend, the few people that I had told, they all encouraged me to stay. They're like, just pray about it. Things will get better. Just be a good Christian. Remember this miracle in the Bible and the other miracle in the Bible. Things will get better. And so here we are at this new place, and things just got absolutely worse. I remember there was this one day he got upset about, I have no clue what. And he ran into our room, and I got upset that he was in our room because I said, that's not fair. When I tell you I need space, you don't give me space. How is it that you get to have this space? And so I was like, no, come out. We got to talk. We're going to talk about this. We're going to figure it out. Come out. And he opened the door. He yelled at me, leave me alone, cursing me out. And as I was turning around, he used his foot and he kicked me. And I went flying in the air. Now, I'm a little thing. I'm 5'5", at the time, barely 100 pounds. He's a little bit over 6 feet, 200 something pounds. Kicked me. I go flying through the air. I damaged my knee, skinned up a lot of areas. And once again, I just sat there looking at him in shock, thinking, did he really just do that? Like, my husband didn't just use his foot to kick me. That didn't happen. Maybe I remembered it wrong. Like, what's going on here? And he would always tell me, it's your fault. You got in the way. It's your fault. And so I remember I called the police that day. And again, I told him, can you just talk to him? Don't arrest him. Just, I'm a good Christian girl. I want my family to work. Can you just talk to him and let him know what he did was wrong? And I remember my knee was all ripped up, and the officers were looking at me and they're like, ma'am, this is assault. You can have him arrested. Are you sure you don't want to press charges? And I told them, no, it's okay. We're just going through some things, but if you can just talk to him. And so they did. They talked to him. In the future, whenever we would have issues or if an argument would happen, it got to the point where he would hide the phone. He would disconnect the internet. He would take my phone from me. He would take my iPad from me, and he would tell me, I'm the man in the house. I make the money. It's my money. You didn't buy it. Therefore, it belongs to me. And if you earn it back, then you'll get it back. He didn't want me to call anyone when these episodes would happen. Things just got worse. He would throw things at me. He had choked me a couple of times. He slapped me. I remember one time he did something like this, slashed me. I had like little blood pockets in my eye. And then I found out I was pregnant with our second child. I absolutely hated having sex with this man. I felt like he was just using me. I felt like he just wanted my body, and that was all. And I remember I would just be there lifeless, just not wanting to be there. There were many times when I told him no, and he would rape me. He would force himself on me. I remember the very first time he raped me, it was anal sex. And I remember just feeling so humiliated. But once again, you have all these people in your ear telling you, well, it's your duty as a wife to please your husband. You're a Christian wife. You believe in God. You just need to pray for him. You just need to listen. You just need to try and be agreeable. And so in my heart of hearts, I knew something isn't right, but I didn't know that I could just leave. I remember one time we got into an argument, and I called our pastor. I packed my bags. I was like, I'm leaving. I can't stay here. He goes from 0 to 100. There are holes in the door, the cracked door frame, all of these things that are going on. He's accosted me several times. I'm leaving. And I remember the pastor said, oh, this is just theatrics. Unpack your bag. If you leave, you will be used by the devil to break up your family. And I remember thinking, oh, I don't want to be used by the devil to break up my family. So, okay, I'm going to stay. And to be fair, he did tell him, don't put your hands on a woman. You can't do any of this. But it just seemed so passive in contrast to, you will be used by the devil to break up your family if you pack your bags and leave your home right now. And so I stayed. And I remember during those days, I wanted nothing more than to kill myself. I felt like there was no way out. I felt like there were no answers. I felt like everyone saw just this amazing side of him. They didn't believe what was going on, or if they knew what was going on, they just encouraged me to stay. And I remember when he would leave for work, I would go sit on our patio, and I would just sit there and rock back and forth and just cry and think, this is my fault. I should have listened. I don't want to be here. I just want to die. There were so many times I thought about jumping over, because we were on like the second or third floor of our apartment building. I just wanted to jump over. I thought, I wonder how badly it would hurt. Things continued to get worse. And then he thought he lost his job. I had to get a job. And he said, I'm going to bring my mom here to live with us for 6 months so she can help take care of the babies while you're working. And I told him, I think that's a terrible idea. We have so many issues. That's not a good idea. And of course, that caused an argument. And then he would just leave. He would leave all day, half the day. He wouldn't tell me where he was going. I would ask him sometimes, hey, where are you going? None of your business, he would tell me, curse me out, slam the door, and just leave. And we only had one family car. Around this time, they say women always know. I had a suspicion that he was cheating on me. And I was just like, something's different. Something's changed. Is there someone else? Would he actually cheat on me? Would he do that? And so he would be gone for hours at a time. Remember one time we got into an argument, and he left my daughter and I alone in the house for Thanksgiving with no food in the house. We had no food in the house. We had very little money. And I remember spending the small bit of money he had left for me on a pizza. And my daughter and I had pizza for Thanksgiving dinner. He left because he was upset that I questioned a relationship that he had with one of his friends. And when I questioned him about it, honestly, it wasn't even that deep because, she had just left a message on his voicemail. I thought it was maybe a client of his. And he was studying to become a real estate investor. And so I thought, well, maybe it's just a client, but she sounded really friendly. He immediately went off. He packed his bags and he left us in the house Thanksgiving weekend. Well, his mom came to live with us for 6 months, and just everything just continued to go to shit. And she took offense at me because I couldn't eat her food. I was pregnant. I was really sick at the time. If he and I had gotten into an argument, he would go spend nights in her room and they would just be up all night laughing, watching movies, all these things. They wouldn't talk to me. They would literally ignore me. And I remember once again just crying. I was like, I don't want to have this child. I don't want to have this baby. What kind of home is this to bring a child into? Like, if I didn't have my other daughter, I would kill myself right now. I don't want to be here. This is not happiness. I remember he would take me to work. He would drop me off at work. And before I even got a chance to get out the car, he would zoom away. Many times the door hitting me and or almost hitting me as I would make my way to work. And I remember back at that time, I had one employer and he would ask me, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? And I would just cry and I'd tell him, I'm okay. Just pray for us. I'm okay. Just pray. Well, the last incident that took place, there were so many: financial abuse, spiritual abuse, emotional abuse. I remember the very last incident that took place. His mother was in the house and we had friends that came into town, and I told him, hey, I would like to go visit these friends. Can I go? And he told me, you can go, but you better be back by a certain time. And if you're not going to be allowed to use the car. And I remember looking at him thinking, whatever, you're not my dad. And he was like, I'm telling you, you better be back by this time. And if you're not, you will not be allowed to use the car again. So I left. I went to this meeting. And while I was there, I kept looking at my clock, and my friends would ask me, are you okay? Is everything okay with you guys? And I would tell them, yes, we just pray for us. Everything's okay. And so the time was approaching, and I looked at my friend. I said, I gotta go. My husband told me I have to be home by a particular time. And my friend looked at me and said, are you sure everything is okay? I said, yeah, everything's good. Everything is fine. So I remember I got in the car, I put my daughter in the car. I raced home. I was about 5 minutes late. I walked in and my ex told me, give me the keys. You are no longer allowed to use the car. And I told him, whatever, it's our car. It's our family car. We're married. He's like, no. You think I'm playing with you? Give me the keys. You are no longer allowed to use the car. Now, he had hidden the keys from me before. It was like this little scavenger hunt. He would hide the keys, and when I would find them, he would take them and hide them other places so I couldn't drive our car. And so I told him, no, I'm not going to give you the keys. We need to go grocery shopping. Do you want to come with us? Let's go. He ran at me, lunged at me, grabbed my arms, and tried to take the keys out of my hand. I was 4 months pregnant at the time. His mother sat right there in the living room. And she's like, oh, you two, stop. Oh, guys, please stop. And he grabbed those keys from me, pushed me out the way, and left. And I told him, I'm gone. Something clicked in my brain, and I told myself, if he is willing to hurt me while I am pregnant with his child, this is not my fault. Something is wrong with him. I had told him before, go to anger management. If you don't go to anger management, I'm leaving. There were so many times I told him, if you do it again, I'm gone. But this time, when he hurt me while pregnant with our daughter, and I'm showing he knows I'm pregnant, I said, okay, I know all that I need to know. I'm out of here. So I remember packing my bags. He and his mother were over me, taunting me. Oh, you're never going to find anyone as good as him. Oh, you think you're all that? It's going to be so hard for you. You're going to be running back. And my ex told me, oh, if you leave, you're not coming back. And his mother was like, yeah, don't let her come back. And they're just over me, taunting me as I'm on the floor with my pregnant belly, just packing the suitcases. And so I remember the next day, I called a friend. I told her what was going on. She's like, I'm coming to get you. She drove up to meet me. His mother told her, you're going to be cursed because you're breaking up this home. And I drove by so that my ex could say goodbye to his daughter, our daughter, and I left. And I had been in that situation for 2 years. And I'm leaving out a lot. But it took me 2 years to finally wake up and realize I can leave. And I did call the cops that time. And I remember it was the same officer who came out to me and he said, ma'am, I know you're a Christian, but this is not a way that any man should treat a woman, especially his wife and the mother of his children. He said, you called us 4 times, and 4 times we've come out to your house. He said, if we have to come out again, social workers might have to come out and take your daughter because we're just going to assume that she's being abused as well. That and him hurting me while pregnant served to jolt me to reality. And I said, I'm leaving. I packed up our stuff. We didn't have anything but 2 suitcases and 2 boxes. And I left. I moved to another state. And I never looked back. I never looked back. I knew I had done the right thing. But as one who, my grandparents raised me, I didn't grow up with my mom and dad. There was nothing more that I wanted growing up than a 2-parent household. And I would cry and I would think, oh my goodness, I'm robbing my children of the opportunity to grow up in a 2-parent home. Like I did this because this is what I chose. And it took me a while. It wasn't until about 3 years later, me just absolutely hitting rock bottom financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And for me to start to heal, I got so many books. I started going to therapy. I started doing yoga and meditation. And it wasn't until then that I finally realized his abuse had absolutely nothing to do with you. Your children not being raised in a 2-parent household had absolutely nothing to do with you. These are his demons. This is his fault. It's his story. You had nothing to do with the abuse that you suffered. And yeah, it took me about 3 years after leaving for me to begin the process of healing. And my ex is a narcissist. So unfortunately, I still deal with some things when it comes to our kids. Every now and then the cops will show up in my house. Or every now and then he'll send me irate text messages back to back to back. But I had to learn how to deal with a narcissist and just keep it to 1 or 2 words. And I have found my peace, and my peace is worth everything in the world. I will never trade it for anything in this world. I am encouraged to share my story with everyone, especially those in the church, because I don't know what it is about Black folk and what it is about church, but we just keep our stories in our hearts. We don't speak on them. We don't share. We don't pass on things to the next generation, or we're encouraged to just take everything to prayer. That is not enough. And it is not the answer. It is not the solution. And so thank you, Nakia, once again for this platform and opportunity to share. And I just wanted to share this last quote from the book that I read. It says, cycles exist because they are excruciating to break. It takes an astronomical amount of pain and courage to disrupt a familiar pattern. Sometimes it seems easier to just keep running in the same familiar circles rather than facing the fear of jumping and possibly not landing on your feet. My mother went through it. I went through it. I'll be damned if I allow my daughter to go through it. It stops here with you and me. It ends with us. And so I just want to champion on all the other sheroes and heroes out here who had the courage to leave and to stand up for themselves.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, love. Listen, I was over here taking notes. Listen, because this is good because we need to know these things. I loved it when you first talked about, not listening to your intuition. Not you felt something and you didn't listen to it. And I had to sit there and was like, whew, because that's deep. because
Yeah.
I was the same way.
Yeah.
I was so high in love, so in my feelings. And I was like, this is my high school crush, even though we weren't married. But I was like, this is my high school crush. He didn't want to date me at the time because I was too much of a good girl. But then after high school, after college, and we hook up, I didn't listen to my intuition either. I didn't pay attention to those signs.
Yeah.
And not paying attention to those signs cost me a lot.
Yes. And our intuition is our superpower. So, like I said, sometimes it's nothing more than I don't like the way that feels. Listen to it. Oh my gosh, for your safety, for your self love, for future generations, listen to that. And also, sometimes there won't be signs. So please don't beat yourself up if you don't see signs or if there aren't, any signs, depending on how long you've known each other or whatever. Narcissists, especially, have this wonderful way of masking all their signs. They're just the most amazing people to everyone else. So don't beat yourself up.
Absolutely, absolutely. But listen, I appreciate you sharing your story. I appreciate you, coming and allowing yourself to share, because it's not an easy thing to do. It's not easy for us to share, our stories and share those vulnerable and hard parts that we had to endure. So I just want to say thank you so much, love, for just coming and just sharing. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Can you, I think my nephew's then got a hold of me. Can you please let everyone know how they can connect with you, follow with you, or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually taking a social media break right now, but you can find me on Instagram as the Sawubona. I actually just wrote a book for women. It's a self-love affirmation book for Black women, and so you can find that information there on my Instagram handle at the Sawubona, and also at the Hippie Goddess Healer.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. So again, love, thank you so very much. I greatly appreciate it. Listen, to all of our listeners, listen, please make sure that you share this. Make sure that you share it with someone who may need it. Okay. Because we definitely want to be able to look out for them signs. We want to know about listening to our intuition. We want to know about, trusting ourselves. Sometimes we have to, we got to learn that. Okay. Despite that love feeling, despite that, ooh, I love them so much, we got to learn how to trust ourselves. Okay. So listen, guys, I will be starting to hold space for these conversations because this is something that's very dear to me. It was hard for me to come out and start sharing my story. And I wanted to just create a space where women can come and share theirs as well and know that they're safe here and know that, hey, I feel you. You know what I'm saying? I was in there just as well. So I appreciate y'all. Listen, hit me and join with me every Thursday, okay? Because we're going to keep this going, all right? We have other women that's going to come and share their stories as well. And like I said, it is needed. All right. So once, listen, make sure that you follow Layla when she finished her social media break. Okay. So make sure that you get with her, follow her. And I look forward to continuing these conversations. All right. And Layla, I look forward to connecting more with you, love. And again, thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Have a good one. Thank you guys. Have a great night. And I'll see you next Thursday.